Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Vaccine Team podcast. I'm Kara Sundlun. This is where we want to get you cutting edge information on the coronavirus pandemic. And we've all had a summer where we've started to get excited about getting back to normal. And now we have the Delta variant looming. So I am joined by Dr. Ulysses Wu. He is the System Director of Infectious Diseases at Hartford Healthcare. So he monitors all of the Hartford Healthcare hospitals in Connecticut, also chief epidemiologist. And as we hear about this Delta variant, doctor, thank you for being here. I think a lot of people are confused and they were thinking, wait a minute, I thought things were getting better. Now we have this new threat.
Right. So thanks for having me on. I appreciate that. But first things first, I've invoked Taylor Swift in some of my talks before. And so what do I mean by that? A virus is going to virus. That's what's going to happen. And so what do viruses like to do? They like to mutate. And so, we got better, but the expectation was that if we didn't get transmission under control, the viruses were going to mutate and they were going to change. Mm-hmm. And the less we have it under control, the faster that we are likely to have mutations and changes. And that we are now dealing with the consequences of this, unfortunately.
And is it just because of certain areas, like certain states that have low vaccination rates? Because obviously here in Connecticut, all we hear is we're doing such a great job. We have a great vaccination rate, yet we're seeing the Delta variant here as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not a United States thing. This originated overseas. And we also have actually our own share of variants that has spread elsewhere, the California variant and the New York variant. And so the best way with the advent of air travel is really to look at this, that the virus obviously has no borders at this point. And so it can travel anywhere, it's highly infectious, and it can travel very quickly. I think the analogy I've used in the past is when somebody urinates in the pool, for example, and you're in a different section of the pool, you're still not going to be protected. And so maybe if we don't use the pool urination example, we could use if somebody lights a Yankee candle in the room, the smell is eventually going to get to you. Yes. And that's kind of how the virus is going to be spread at this point. We're not protected by our borders.
So the CDC has come out with some new guidelines suggesting masking indoors in places where there's high transmission, which apparently is 60% of counties in the United States. What's your advice for masking right now, especially for those who are listening and living in Connecticut?
Yeah, that's a good question. The county data is actually quite fascinating, and I've seen the colors on the map in high areas of transmission and prevalence. And so my recommendation, and it's actually always been the same, regardless of the Delta variant, regardless of our vaccination rates, when you're outdoors, you're probably pretty good, unless you're in a very large group, you're in a very large crowd of maybe unvaccinated or unknown vaccinations. But indoors, I'm kind of recommending you should probably mask up, especially if you don't know everybody else's vaccination status. So even with close family units where people may not have access to vaccines, such as kids, or people who may not have mounted an appropriate immune response, those who may be on chemotherapy, or those who may be currently immunosuppressed, masking is probably appropriate, not just for protecting you, but also protecting those around you. So indoors, mask. Outdoors, you're probably okay.
Okay. So like right now here at work, we've all released no one's wearing masks anymore, except those who are not vaccinated are advised to wear a mask. Hard to know if everyone's being honest, but our company took away the mask mandate, maybe just about a month ago. It hasn't been that long.
Yeah.
Do you foresee that more and more companies and just in general, places are going to say we need to mask up indoors again?
I do see that. And so what I use as my indoor masking only mandate for me is the most conservative measure. The CDC actually, it's not a mandate, it's a recommendation, but the key behind it is that they recommend it in high prevalence of transmission areas. And that's not Connecticut right now. So actually your company is actually probably okay. But if you wanted to take the utmost caution, because it gets complicated when you say high prevalence, low prevalence, how do you know what county is red, which one is blue? I just say indoors mask, outdoors, you're good.
Okay. What about the kids right now who haven't been vaccinated? I live with one of them. My son's 11. He had COVID. It was a mild case. He's fully recovered as far as I know. Um, but we're all vaccinated, so we're living kind of a normal life right now and just saying, okay, hopefully when his birthday comes in September. But I think people are confused about what to do, especially with kids and kids heading back to school.
Yeah. I think masking will be a part of school going forward, but the best way to protect your kid who cannot get vaccinated is to form that bubble. And the best way to have that protective bubble is to keep you from not being infected and anybody else he comes in contact with. There are 4 tenets that we've always talked about in terms of prevention of this disease. Number one, and the most important right now, is vaccination. And so that's not just vaccination for your child who can't get it, but vaccination for his immediate bubble around him. Number 2 is the social distancing. And that doesn't obviously happen when it comes to a family unit. Number 3 is masking. And so vaccination and masking is something we do have control over, that we like to say that really that's the best way to protect it. And that's maybe the best way to look at the vaccine. It's not really just about ourselves. It's about our village. It's about our community and protecting those around us. And that's how we need to look at vaccinations at this point.
I think the vaccine, or rather the mask and pandemic fatigue, is real in that we all know, right? We went through it. We all masked. We did social distancing. We worked really hard because we thought we were working for a goal of normalcy. And this summer has felt very normal. People are traveling again. They're out with friends. They got their vaccine. They're feeling fearless. So it sounds though, from as we talk to you, it's almost like we need to go backwards.
Yeah, I mean, the analogy for that would be, this was a marathon and we were doing great. Well, we obviously had some, the winter was bad. The fall was bad. Obviously, last year was bad. And we were so close with the vaccinations. Remember when the vaccinations came out, there was this mad rush to get them. And we were so close. But for some reason, with the 30% that are unvaccinated in Connecticut, well, it's more, we're talking fully vaccinated. So, and for the rest of the country, probably 50, 60% that are not fully vaccinated at this point. It's almost like we were running a marathon and we stopped at mile 24. And we just said, all right, we can walk it from here. And unfortunately, a lot of things passed us, and the virus has, again, the increase in transmission has allowed it to mutate and proliferate at this point. And I've always said that the vaccine, it was the greatest thing against this, but it did cause an unnecessary bad side effect in the sense that it caused us to relax. We took our foot off the pedal at this point. And so, like you said, people are traveling, vaccinated and unvaccinated. People are having gatherings and parties, vaccinated and unvaccinated. So we let our foot off the pedal probably a little bit too soon.
Is the Delta variant more dangerous? Are you more worried about it because people are saying it's so much more contagious? How much more contagious is it?
Yeah, it's probably 100-fold more contagious at this point. It's more dangerous because it is more contagious. The more infections you have, the worse your outcomes from a population standpoint are going to be. But the beauty is that the vaccinations do work against the Delta variants. And we've heard about all these breakthrough cases that may be happening. The breakthrough cases are actually not that common, but they are certainly happening. But the beauty of the vaccine, and we have to change how we message the vaccine. The vaccine, an added side benefit is that it does prevent disease. But the most important thing about the vaccine was it was supposed to take a very deadly disease and turn it into a normal common cold. And we are seeing that with our hospitalizations. Some people are coming in that have been vaccinated, but for the most part, by and large, they are unvaccinated. Then you take the next level of severity, which is the ICU. Even less are vaccinated, with most of the cases being in the unvaccinated. And then finally, those who are on ventilators, by and large, are for the most part unvaccinated people. That's how we need to approach the vaccine.
When you say almost all or by and large, I think that's really good, but people are concerned about breakthrough cases. What do we know about breakthrough cases of people coming down with COVID after being fully vaccinated?
So Nothing's 100%. There is no vaccine that is 100% necessarily. And so with the breakthrough cases, you are, for the most part, protected. But there are breakthroughs. We've vaccinated hundreds of millions of people so far in the country, and there have only been tens of thousands of breakthrough cases. And so that percentage is incredibly low at this point. But that doesn't mean that you can't get it, and that doesn't mean that you can't have a hospitalization, and that doesn't mean that you can't die from it either. But your
Have we had people die from, on record? Do we know people who have died from COVID even after being fully vaccinated?
Unfortunately, there have been deaths in the country that have, for people who have been fully vaccinated. Now, they did have other conditions that would have predisposed them to not responding well to coronavirus, which leads back to our village comment that we still need to protect those around us by vaccinating ourselves so we don't transmit it to somebody who may have conditions such as that.
So let's go to the other side of the spectrum. I was reading articles that if you have summer cold, I had one a couple of weeks ago, stuffy nose, runny nose, sore throat. I didn't know. I'm like, maybe it's allergies, maybe it's a summer cold. And then I was reading that you should probably assume that if you have a summer cold, don't just assume it's a cold or allergies, that even if you're fully vaccinated, it may be the Delta variant causing cold symptoms.
Yeah,
what's your take?
That's a good point. Those who are vaccinated, they tend to have less severe symptoms when they come in contact with COVID if they are infected. But the other problem is with everybody unmasking, guess what's coming back? All of those colds. Influenza may be an issue coming in the fall and in the more so in the winter, because masking is going to be less prevalent unless we go back to those mandates. And with less masking, we're going to see all of those lovely other viruses that we saw before coronavirus was prevalent. And so things like influenza, parainfluenza, RSV, human metapneumovirus, the original OG coronaviruses that used to cause the common colds. Like, those are the things that we're going to see because we're not wearing a mask. So come fall and winter, guess who's wearing a mask? I'm going to be wearing a mask because I didn't get a cold last year, knock on wood, or fingers crossed, whatever you want to say. So they're going to come back.
Yeah. I didn't get a cold either. I did get COVID, but I recovered. So
Oh, I'm so glad you got better.
Yeah, I got better. And I was being careful, but I'm actually not even exactly sure where I got it from. I have a suspicion, but we all got it and we all recovered. So I'm hoping that gives me extra immunity that I had it and I have 2 vaccines in me. But
excellent. You should be good.
What about boosters? Are we going to need them?
So there are 2 things that determine whether or not you get boosters. Number 1 is your level of immunity after the vaccine. And so there is a possibility that you may have lifelong immunity, but that is probably unlikely. And so they are doing studies to look at the level of protection over time with these vaccines. And Pfizer has actually just recently released one where they are concerned that the immunity may be waning at this point. So that's the one thing.
Yesterday, the news was that they wanted us to get a 3rd shot.
They're not saying we need to get a 3rd shot yet, but they are concerned and that we may need to get a 3rd shot.
Okay.
The other reason to get a booster or a completely new vaccine is the presence of the variants. And that goes back to the Taylor Swift, virus is going to virus, it's going to mutate. And Delta may soon be a distant memory at this point because there are other Greek letters that may be coming down the road, which are going to happen if we don't start decreasing transmission. And that's the real reason we wanted to get everybody vaccinated as fast and as soon as possible, to stop transmission, thus to stop development of variants and mutants.
Are you seeing the vaccine hesitant now come around and get more vaccines because of the news about the variants?
It was a trickle for a while. I think it's increased a little bit across the country and in our area as well. But for the most part, there is probably at least a good 30% that are just very dogmatic about, I'm not getting the vaccine. It doesn't matter. Nobody knows anything about this. Or the perils of misinformation. There's a lot of misinformation that is out there. And unfortunately, they're listening to their own echo chamber, and thus they are subject to their own misinformation over and over and over.
And I think, people have been afraid of some of the real cases, the myocarditis and young people that, worried about, do I give it to my teen? What if he's one of the few, even though there've been so
Yeah,
small cases? Or a large number of women, I know lots of them have had menstrual cycle changes after getting the
sure,
vaccine and not
sure.
knowing why, which as long as I have you, any news on why we're all experiencing that or so many are?
Well, I can't talk about the menstrual cycle changes, but the myocarditis, that's a good thing to actually talk about. And so when we were seeing an increase in myocarditis cases, uh, guess what? We see all these myocarditis cases even before coronavirus at this time of the year. This
Okay.
is actually a normal thing. And so the key is to establish causality.
Yeah.
Was it due to the vaccine, or was it due to the fact that myocarditis usually happens around this time of the year in kids and young adults at this point? So I think they did studies and they finally concluded there may be an increased association of myocarditis associated with the vaccine. However, guess what has even a greater case of giving you myocarditis? That's coronavirus. And
Okay.
so you are hundreds of times more likely to get myocarditis from the coronavirus itself, from the vaccine, where cases are still limited.
Myocarditis, for those who don't know, just inflammation of the heart muscle, which we know when we get coronavirus, you have a massive, sometimes inflammatory effect from the virus. So what you're saying is not getting vaccinated doesn't protect you from the myocarditis either. As we near the end of our time with you, what is your advice right now of how people, actually, I want to ask you about the mask. You had a good tip about the mask. We've been reading that maybe you need an N95 mask because the Delta variant is so contagious. It is more contagious. You've said that to us, but you have a tip on how we should just be okay with our standard surgical masks. And I'd love you to show us that.
Yeah, well, I mean, so surgical masks should be perfectly fine. The problem with that is the fit. And without the proper fit, you're possibly going to get infected. And that's actually why they recommended double masking. It wasn't because you have two layers of this. It was because when you put your mask on and then you put another mask on over top of it, you these nooks and crannies, like an English, Thomas's English muffin, they're not really there, and you're having a tighter fit with the second mask. And so what people have done, they've twisted around to try to give them a better fit as well. You've also seen people with maybe clips in the back that pull it a lot tighter and also reduces the pressure on their ear. Or you've seen the double mask, which increases the fit because you just have two masks that are protecting all those nooks and crannies that are over this. The thing about N95s is that with healthcare workers, we actually have to get a test to wear that N95 to make sure that it actually works. And so people are saying, yeah, I'll just throw an N95 on, but without a good fit test, you have no idea if it's protecting you at all. It probably is protecting you to a certain extent, but as healthcare workers, we have to go through a fit test. We have to smell all these different things, make sure we can't smell it, make sure nothing's getting through to make sure that the N95 actually works.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, as someone who has spent your life studying viruses, chief of epidemiology, you're saying regardless of our vaccination, we all should be wearing masks again, as of today, indoors.
I'm not gonna go against the CDC recommendation. That's just me being crazy for myself. No, I'm kidding. It's not crazy to wear a mask at all. Indoors, we know indoor transmission is much greater than outdoor transmission. And so if you are in an area of high prevalence or you are with a group of unknown vax or those who didn't get the vaccination, if you're indoors, you should probably wear a mask. But I'm not going to outright say always wear a mask indoors. I would love everybody to do it, but I know that everybody's not going to do it.
But what about risk versus benefit? Everyone's saying, well, this is why we went and got vaccines. This is why we went through maybe missing a couple of days of work because we had reactions. This is, now if all I get is a sniffly nose from this Delta variant, like that's why I got a vaccine. So I can live a normal life. What's your answer to that?
So I'm not sure I completely understand the question, but
well, I mean, is people will say, oh, there's not much of a risk. What am I going to get? Just a mild cold, maybe if I get it because I'm already vaccinated, I'm good to go. I don't need to do this. I got the vaccine so I can live normally.
Okay. So yeah, that was part of the reason of the COVID vaccine. But we have to remember that there are those small breakthrough cases that are happening and with possible deaths, but it is also protecting those around you as well. So the vaccine and masking is not, if there was a general take-home theme, I would say about vaccinations and masking, it is no longer about ourselves. It is about our village. It is about our community. Everybody has to pitch in, and putting on a mask like this may be very inconvenient to other people, but it's not inconvenient to me, and it's the least I can do to protect other people.
What's the end game? Because I think people are saying, I just can't do this for the rest of my life.
Well, the end game is if we don't drive all the numbers down, if we continue to have variants coming, the end game is that this could be the rest of your life, because we've done such a poor job with our vaccination rates and our masking. We have to remember that the benefits of what we're doing right now, our ability to travel, our ability to eat outside or eat in restaurants and hang out with people, is because of vaccinations. And before that, it was because of masks. So it goes back to my marathon analogy. Why are we stopping at mile 23, 24 at this point?
If we start wearing masks again and doing all the things that we need to do, how do we get to the final mile? Like, how long is that?
It depends how fast we mask up and how fast we get all our vaccinations. If we could get to 100% vaccination rate, we could probably decrease the transmission. I'm not going to say completely. There will always be sporadic transmission of all different types of viruses. But we don't want to return back to the time of where we were losing the equivalent of a 9/11 every single day. We were losing greater than 3,000 people in this country every single day. That's lost. It's almost like, oh, well, it's just 3,000 people. Like, we don't want that to happen, let alone one. So the end game is 0 deaths and just normal common cold. That's at the worst. That's what we want it to be.
Yeah. What are you seeing every day in Hartford Hospital right now? Like, how have things changed in the last month because of the new variants?
There's uncertainty and hesitancy. I love the organization that these workers are tirelessly working for. So I can't speak in terms of everybody's mental state of mind, but people are ready. We are wary. There's probably some anxiety, but the people that work for HHC they're troopers. They're doing their job.
They're amazing.
And we're getting ready for it's wave after wave. We're prepared for this.
Are you seeing a new wave? Like, actually more and more, we're starting to look at the numbers on the news and say, oh, it's creeping up. I mean, are your rooms getting full again, or you're still in a great spot and we just need to be careful? How would you characterize what you're seeing with patients right now?
Anything above 0 is not a great spot for me.
Yeah.
So we got down to, I'll say single digits earlier. Unfortunately, we still have a handful of cases across the system, probably in the 20s at this point. And I think that's 20 too much, but it's nothing like the hundreds we had before last winter. So in relativity, yeah, it looks great. But given this time of year, we shouldn't be in double digits at this point.
Well, I do recall that I was interviewing an epidemiologist probably a week before the world shut down, and she had suggested, Dr. Akiko Iwasaki, I don't know if you know her from Yale, she had suggested that they're going to have to cancel the parades, and we're going to have to, and it all seemed crazy at the time. Like, what? We're going to cancel parades? We're going to go inside? It was, maybe a week before the world shut down. And so I guess right now we're all thinking, oh no, we're good. We're not going backwards. But what I'm gathering from speaking to you, who's a little bit farther ahead in knowledge than the rest of us, is that we do need to take a step backwards according to your perspective in order to someday take a giant leap forward.
Yeah, and masking is not even a step backwards. It's a minor inconvenience at the best. The vaccine hesitancy, I certainly get, but that is going to be the key to our salvation. I don't want to call getting a vaccine taking a step backwards. I want to actually step forward. It's like Chutes and Ladders. Remember that game?
Oh yeah.
It's like you can go all the way up like this, or you can take the big ladder that goes all the way to the top by getting your vaccination.
Yeah. So definitely, I know the encouragement to get people the vaccine, but as far as right now, the masking, and hopefully you don't see us, at least right now, having to go back to lockdowns or telling people they can't travel or those types of restrictions that were so restrictive.
Right. It's I don't foresee this happening in the next few weeks. So it is still summer season and people are outside. A lot of this is driven by human behavior. And so it's not like the winter is more lethal because of the coldness. It's more lethal because we're all cohorting inside in the winter. And so if you look at our epidemiology over the course of the summer, you can see after every holiday, there's some spikes, right? That's because people are getting together. It was a hot, sticky, wet summer. That drove people inside into air conditioning. Same problem again. And you see that in the Deep South. I've lived in the Deep South. It is hot as all get out down there.
Yeah.
And you couldn't even go swimming because it was so hot sometimes.
Okay.
People are inside. That's where the transmission is going to happen. And we saw this last fall. It was like a switch had flipped. I remember the day, October 17th. It started getting colder. We started seeing more cases. And that's when the third, they call it the third wave, I think at that point, had started at that point. So a lot of this is driven by social behavior.
I'm going to ask one question for some moms right now that we're just entering into August. There's a whole month of summer left. If you have younger children that you have planned that they're going to go away to camp, maybe even sleepaway camp for a couple of weeks. And right now the camps are not under the restrictions of masking or lockdowns or anything that was last year. And there, does your opinion change about sending the under 12 to camps right now unmasked?
It can be done, but it has to be done with caution. And unfortunately, unmasked is really not an option. Maybe they don't need to be masked all the time because hopefully they're outside running, playing, and things like that. But if you're indoors without adequate ventilation, masking should be a part of the conversation you should have with your child.
Yeah. Okay. Dr. Ulysses, well, we appreciate it. And I know things are changing week by week, but I appreciate your perspective and helping people sort through what they need to be doing right now.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.